We're back with former RNC chair and former Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele. Welcome, sir. I'll remind everyone with the stats on the screen here that there is widespread support, including Trump voters and many self-identified Republicans, on the basics about background checks, database, and even actual gun control, like an assault weapons ban, depending on how you answer the question. Your thoughts on what we just walked through?
No, I thought you laid out the current state of play here very concisely. It is than perhaps they may have been at other times. Not that they were less caring and less bothered by it, but there's something different about this. And I think one of the things that's different and why it's so much harder for the Ted Cruzes of the world to stand in front of a bank of cameras and acknowledge what their position has done and has allowed to occur is, for the first time, we're hearing stories about these babies, these children, being unrecognizable to their parents. Their parents have to give DNA samples so that they can match the child with the parent. And that, on top of everything else, is so difficult to comprehend, that the violence that occurred in that classroom was so devastating that mom has to submit a lock of hair or a swab of her own DNA in order to match this up, her with her child. And the country's looking at that and going, holy hell, no, are you kidding me? Imagine as a parent being in that position. Imagine as a relative being in that position, or a neighbor who used to see that child running down the street, or who would come collect money for a school event. No longer there because of this. And I think this has become very personal for a lot of Americans, Ari. So the way you've narratively set this out with the facts and the politics behind that, and the energy that's, I think, thrusting this story right now, is not so much that's all important, but how people are leaning into this because of what they now realize, which happened in other cases. But really, for the first time, we've seen this reported this way.
To pick up your point on the facts and the reality of the sheer gruesome evil of that, as you walked us through, but gruesome evil committed through a certain tool, in this case, tools of war, which is why, as I've explained to people, they're not tools of self-defense. And that's distinct from other places. Evil, violence has existed throughout the history of society, but we've shown throughout the coverage this week, and shown it before, that the gun-related violence is much higher. So we have the higher murder rate, we have the higher murdered children rate, we have now the highest cause of death among children in America is guns. And yet many of those guns aren't easy to get in other places, so they're not easy to use to, as you said, dismember people. We could be as clear and frank about it as possible. Here's that headline I mentioned, which is the facts. And it's the same with grenades, Michael. I mean, if you had a grenade problem where people were walking around lobbing grenades into classrooms, as a society, you'd have to say, how do we weigh the access to grenades and what they're used for with the cost of the grenade mass murder? I'm not speaking loosely. The AR-15 and the grenade are both for war, and they're not precise or exact weapons that can be lawfully, easily used for self-defense. As for the politics, I want to get you on this. We heard last night from Michael Hirschhorn, who's a progressive activist with a background in reality TV, which kind of a little bit of a combo there, but he believes that the message discipline on specifically the Democratic left, he says, is hurting some of the push for gun control, that some of the stuff he views it as quote unquote too emotional. Take a listen.
This is a moment for less emotion and more cynicism. How do we gain power so that we can put in place the policies that we want to put in place? We're responding emotionally and not strategically. They've lost that ability to think politically. We say things need to change, they have to change, but we know they're not going to change. We don't step back and say, what do we need to do in order to force things to change?
Michael, he gave the example specifically of how Clinton sold stopping, quote, cop killer bullets as the way that they sold the ban on those high-capacity magazines in the 94 bill, which is fact check true. Your response?
No, I think he's right, and I think the messaging is very, very important. And I would align myself with him this way and say you can do both. I can be emotional about the tragedy in front of me, but I also need to be strategic about how I confront it and how I deal with it. First messaging point: this isn't gun control, people. We're so past gun control. There are 400 million guns in this country for a nation of 310, 20 million people. So we've got more guns than people. So it ain't about controlling anything. It is about gun safety, gun preparedness, gun responsibility. It is about making sure that the vast majority of gun owners are law-abiding, good people, good citizens, right, left, center. Their politics is irrelevant to how they own their guns. And what should be noted is the responsibility they have. So let's talk about it in that context on one end. But now let's move into the space where we're looking at dead bodies of children. And we cannot shy away from the fact that the reason we're doing that is because this individual decided to use a weapon of war, a weapon that quite honestly is being used on the front lines of Ukraine. All right. So the reality of it is, this is not Ukraine. We're not in a war here. We're not in a war on our kids and our communities or people who go to the movies. So let's stop acting like we can't address that more directly and say, this is not just about the psychological impact. This is not about the Second Amendment. This is about what responsibility our elected leaders are going to take to do something about this, and the responsibility that's on us to hold them accountable. When they run away from the bank of microphones and can't answer a direct question, make that little checkbox for November, people, because that person needs to go.